So I was invited here by Paul to speak on a very, very critical subject of our time, which is masculinity and male suicide. So I wanted to bring some of the aspects that haven't yet been spoken about in the public sphere anyway, to help gain a broader audience to help understand why this is happening in our society at the moment. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's an epidemic yet, but given the way that society treats men and masculinity, and that every turn we're told we're toxic, useless, worthless, not needed, it's become a pandemic of that. And suicide is one of the outcomes that has been a way out for men because they just feel useless and worthless and they feel isolated, and it's a terrible place to be. I know people that have lost their lives because of that. I've worked with men that have been close to doing it. I've helped men out of it, and it's something that speaks very, very closely to me. So it's super important for me to be here to be speaking about it.
Sitting center stage here is Jaguar, who from his own personal experience dealing with pain and the prisons that programming impose on all of us, is going to share how you can break free of that. And thank you for coming to see Jaguar. And I'd like you please to give him a big round of applause for Jaguar.
Thank you for coming out. So just to extend on, I didn't actually catch your name. Raim. What Raim was talking about, I feel one of the most important things that we have as the greatest teacher is our own journey. And I went to study a psychology degree. This was 7-8 years ago now. And after I got into about a year of it, I realized that all I was doing was getting good at regurgitating information that wasn't actually directly aligned with what I'd learned. There was some good stuff, but others not so much. And I felt like I was being programmed, essentially. And my critical thinking started to go out the window a little bit when I was doing this degree. And what I'd realized is prior to this, my life had developed and given me a series of events that I was able to reflect upon, which led me to deeper understanding about myself. Through this level of commitment to self-discovery, self-awareness, I started to understand that there was a large amount of, you call it shadow material, unconscious material, many blind spots that would keep me doing things that I couldn't quite figure out why I was doing them. And it just drove me nuts. And regular psychological material was not really getting me to the point of why this was happening. Rather, it was actually trying to just sublimate the thing that was happening, the symptom. So it was dealing with this symptomatic approach as opposed to root cause dissolution. The way that I like to do things, I'm extremely lazy. So I like to get to point A to point B as quickly as possible. I don't like to go in circles and spend a long time doing things. I don't believe in it. So if I can figure out the shortest way to get somewhere, then I'm going to find that. Now, laziness being I don't really need the entire process to do it, but trying to discover how to do it in the quickest way was always the thing that I would go after. And I started to look for what could possibly be the key to finding things really, really quickly. And when it hit me, it was almost like a lightning bolt. And what I discovered, it was language. And there was a deeper processing to language that many people don't get. Language, in my opinion, it constructs reality. It builds reality. If we don't have a word for something, then we don't know how to interact with it because we can't give meaning to it. Now, what I use as an example for this is like a jigsaw puzzle. So if you've got the box of the jigsaw puzzle, let's say there's a stallion on top of it. If you take all the pieces out, and let's say this is the complete picture of you on top of the box, you take all the pieces out and you look at one piece, the full picture is not going to be able to be identified, so you won't know what you're looking at because you won't be able to prescribe meaning to something that you can't fully see. So when I started to understand that language was the access point, it was like the lock and the key, what I started to see was in order to heal something, what we do in society is we look at it in isolation. So if I've got a bad knee as an example, or a sore lower back, I'm just going to look at the symptomatic approach to a sore lower back or a sore knee. I'm not going to keep going into deeper and deeper layers to try to understand that. So what I started to see was what words do is they give us like a web of a connection. So as an example, a hand. A hand is the appendage at the end of your arm. There's can you give me a hand, and there's a hand in poker. So it's got multiple meanings and multiple associations. So when I started to look at this, I started to say, okay, well, if there's one word, then there'll be other words that have the same meaning that we can derive as a form of association, synonyms, and then antonyms. Antonyms are the opposite. When I started to look at these two structures around words, what I also started to see was everything operated in this kind of dualistic sense, an active and a passive state, zeros and ones with binary code, left and right, light and dark, hot and cold. Everything started to operate in these primary opposites. So when I started to look at where everything was coming from, I remember I was going through a breakup and I hadn't thought about it for a little while and I wasn't upset. And I thought, why am I not upset if most of the focus these days is on somatic and feeling work? But what's informing the feeling? So if I'm feeling heartbroken, why am I not feeling heartbroken if I'm not thinking about the person, and what structure do thoughts come in? It's words. And so when I started to pull on this thread, I started to see more and more with it. And then what I did is I realized that in a previous role that I had, I used to be in the investment industry. And what I started to see, and my friend Mark here, and he can attest to this, when we would be on the phone to clients, I would know what they were going to say before they said it. Not because of some psychic ability, but because I realized people are largely programmed. And we're largely a bunch of unconscious programs. And the form of children, we're programming further unconscious programs. This is it. I could go on about the Matrix for hours about how much of a representation for that is for unconscious versus consciousness. But I started to look at, okay, how do we break this down? And so when we're building a house, we need a blueprint first. So you don't go and buy a tap fitting and build a house around a tap fitting or a sink or a couch you like. You develop a blueprint. And so I thought, okay, if we're going from the ground up, what people look at is they think the blueprint is the blue lines on the outside, but many people ignore the space inside it, the negative space, the empty space. Words give you access through defensiveness to the negative space in the unconscious or the shadow realm, which then can lead you into revelation. And I'll explain all this as we go along. So I looked at, who am I without my identity? Who am I without my history? Who am I if I had no memory? Then who would I be without a memory? And that hit me like a train. Because when you start to realize, you see that your memory is really based in images and words, which we place meaning on the images in words. But if I remove those images and words, including my name, date of birth, country of origin, then who am I? And it's a scary thought, because all of that is based in an egoic structure. And one part is the ego, one part is the soul. So that expansive nature, the soul, that is a tapestry of pure possibility and creation. To the ego, that represents fear, because our greatest fear is extinction. Our greatest fear is pushing our edges into complete and utter annihilation. The paradox of that is the game is annihilation of the identity, but that's where you become free. So I started to look at, what is the mind? Most people think the mind is just this space that operates here. But I didn't necessarily agree with that, because it was just too simple. And what I saw from this was the mind is just a space. That's all it is. This is why Tom Cronin did some meditation earlier. It's about clearing the mind. We want to clear the mind out. But if we want to clear the mind out, how do we do that, and where do thoughts come from? And this is where I started to look at this. I'm like, where do thoughts come from? I said, well, where do they originate? And I started to think, well, it's in my head. And I'm like, well, no, that's a thought about a thought. That's not actually where thoughts sit. Because when you disconnect from the belief that they sit in your head, you start to sort of feel they're around you in a way. There's a bit of a wider experience and a wider field that they come from. So the mind is a space. And when our mind is full with a lot and we're ruminating, how do we feel? Feel pretty tired. It starts to get exhausting. And so when I look at things and I break them down, I have to know the structure that I'm interacting with in order to understand the very properties by which that interaction builds above, like a blueprint. Now, what I do with that is I look at what happens in a space. Well, it gets filled. And if we look at the world of physics and quantum field theory, that even when no particles are present, the field still exists and there's fluctuation. So there's still movement even when there's nothing there, apparently nothing. I don't think that nothing even exists, because something has never come from nothing. And if we're identifying nothing, that means it's something. So the reality is we can define the mind into different parts. So I started to look at, okay, let's break it apart into different areas. The first is thought, which is the ability to form ideas, reason, reflect, make judgments, logic, analyzing, problem solving, and planning can occur here. Doesn't mean that they're every single part of it, but that's the large majority of it. Perception was the next part. This was a fascinating thing around perception, because once you see things in one way, you can shift to see it in a different way, and it can have a completely different experience in your life. When you can see that you've been a victim of something, but when you transcend it and you see the gift in it, then that perception shifts and it can be completely different. So as an example, one of the programs I'm going to reveal today is I'm not safe. Now, when you're not safe, above that, there's going to be a certain negative emotional addiction used as a defense mechanism to hide the programmed of I'm not safe. So when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So when you're not safe, everything's going to look like an opportunity for fear and to not be able to trust. So there's programming, and then there's a line of defenses that operate to hide the program. So the perception, once you see things at the root level, light goes into the thing that you previously couldn't see. Matter and antimatter. Matter is light, antimatter is darkness. So perception. This is how we interpret the information around us. This is through our five senses, which we all know what they are. And the mind turns raw data into a meaningful experience. It turns raw data into a meaningful experience. If I have, let's say, there's a lot of stuff in the world that's very chaotic at the moment. Some of us will pull more towards what's going on in Palestine and Israel and have certain opinions. Others won't have any opinion about that, because the meaning that they're making from it, outside of the atrocities of war, but the personal connection to it, if it's not there, the impact that those events will have from, say, a religious or political perspective will maybe mitigated than someone that has family there or grew up there. This is just the way of the perception operates. So the next part of the mind is emotion, which is the subjective experience of feeling, which can be amazing for beautiful experiences, watching a sunset, having a deep meditation, falling in love, getting married, holding your child for the first time, playing with your dog. Or it can be disastrous if let run rampant. The people that we encounter where life just seems to be so difficult, everything seems to be hard, they don't seem to want to get over anything or change anything. We're all living we're living in the same place, but with a completely different perception. This is all informed by subconscious programming. We've got memory, which shapes identity based on past experience, which we can project onto a future of concern. And when we're looking at from a future of concern, we're being reactive. When we're looking at the future as a place of beauty, and if you are looking at it from a place of beauty, chances are you're probably just present, then you can start to be more creative. So people that are looking through this lens of a future of concern are reactive. They're reacting to something. People that are not looking at it from a place of concern, they're looking at it from a creative perspective. Reactivity and creativity are the same word, same letters, the C is just in a different place. Okay, but an entirely different experience. And of course, imagination. Creativity, innovation, planning, and why people can't achieve powerful creativity is because they're in powerless reactivity. This is where I was mentioning earlier, the binary aspects of life. Active and passive, zeros and ones, reactive and creative. This is how we operate. A reactive mind is something that has been reactivated from the past. It's quite simple. Anything you're reacting to is something that has existed before. That's why it's reactive. It's another action. It's the same thing. So if we think about, as an example, where we have a new experience, if we're going overseas for the first time to a place we've always wanted to go, to a place we've never been, we're going to get there, and it's going to be like, oh my God, your perception becomes panoramic. Whereas if you're driving the same route home every day for 4 years, your perception becomes myopic. You switch off and you don't think about it. So again, we're back in this binary structure, myopic and panoramic. A new experience, you're like, oh wow, this is wonderful. If you're walking through the streets of Rome and you've never been there, the architecture's beautiful, the statues are beautiful, the cathedral, everything's amazing, and you're caught up in the present moment because your perception is panoramic. The more we get traumatized and programmed and limited through our history that then accumulates up, we become more myopic about our worldview, and it's all informed by our subconscious programming. This is why cleaning up your subconscious mind is critical to becoming healthy. I've known a lot of people that are in amazing shape externally, but an absolute dumpster fire internally, like an absolute mess, and they haven't cleaned up their programming. And so they think that by compensating externally, they're going to make up for the conflict internally. So if we look at the root cause of every single entire problem, it's going to be conflict. Every single one. Every single problem you encounter, every single perception of something, every single action that you regret or you resent or you feel guilty about, every single one is going to be based on some form of conflict. Conflict is the root of all problems. And so where does the conflict exist? Well, it's within us. I said it earlier, I did a relationship workshop, and I said we'll never create peace in the world while people are at war within themselves. And the war is between who we are and who we're not. It's very simple. If everyone just switches and goes internal, it's going to be, and takes full self-responsibility, it's going to be a much cleaner world to live in, psychologically, a much happier world emotionally, a much more whole world spiritually, and we'll start to move into harmony. So, as I mentioned earlier, I like to break things down, know the full structure. And so when I break things down, I look at all the elements that go with it. So there's obviously unconscious, subconscious, and conscious. The subconscious, has everyone seen Inception here, the movie? Where they're going down into the dream state and time slows down and there's the snowmobiles with the defenses? That's where you have to go. And there's a process to get there. So they don't just go from the waking world right down into the deepest world. They go into one world and then into the second layer. They start to wake people up because there's defenses in there. I can't remember what they call them in the movie, but if you start to get out of line in there, these people will come for you to try to wake you up to send you back to the world above. And then you go down into the snowmobile world, which is so brilliantly produced because they're all camouflaged, they're harder to see, they're all in white, which is quite a good analogy because that's what we're trying to bring light to instead of it being in the darkness. So that's how well defended it is. We're very, very well defended in our subconscious and our unconscious psychology. So I'll break this down into a couple of different realms, but I'll give you the chain. So at the basic level, everything's a vibration. Everything. Pretty much all fields of major physics will agree that vibration is the basis of everything. Vibration, as it moves, creates a sound. Sound shortens and it creates a tone. Tone then creates a word. Word creates language. Language creates a code. Code creates a program. This is the subconscious defense structure. So we've got the unconscious, which is pure vibration. We could say the soul is there. And then we have the subconscious, which is the defense mechanisms to that. Then above that, we have the conscious mind, which each one of these programs, the code informs the program. So as an example, when you're trying to change the program, what you have to do is you have to get to the code of the program. So if you want to change your website, let's say it's green and you want to change it to blue, you don't start painting the screen blue. You have to go behind and change the code to represent the necessary changes that you want to make. Most people are just trying to paint the screen of life. And it doesn't work. That's why most people repeat things. So each one of these programs and prisons, they have a set of thoughts that go with it. And to go back to where I was looking at earlier about thoughts, thoughts are automated. They're automatic. They're just produced from these prisons. So thought, and why I used the heartbreak analogy earlier, thought informs feeling. Now, if you're walking down the street and you've gone through a breakup and you're not thinking about the person, you're not going to be upset about it. It's that simple. You're not going to walk down the street going, what's all this heartbreak going on? Why am I don't get it. There's a story that precedes the feeling. And feelings will then drive behavior. Behavior produces a result. Results create experiences. Experiences repeat and form patterns. Okay? Most people, this is all in the conscious world too, most people are just trying to fix things at the behavior level. This is why it doesn't work. New Year's Eve is a classic example of that. People go, okay, cool, it's New Year's Day, new year, new me. I'm going to quit drinking, quit taking drugs, quit partying, whatever it is, and then I will just have one more night out there before we actually start. Or one last hurrah, but I'll do it tomorrow. It's like, if you need a day to be starting a better practice for your life, you're living in reactivity. The person that says one day, that's enough, they're living in a creative space as opposed to a reactive space. They don't need a date to start. Most people live here trying to modify behavior. It's like, I'll feel good when I've got this amount of money. I'll feel good when I've got that car, when I've got that girlfriend, that boyfriend, when I'm that, waist size, whatever. But then just another thing comes up and it'll just shift to somewhere else. Because the way in which you're interpreting the world is I'm trying to fix it through something external, as opposed to losing the thing internal that is driving the idea that I can fix it by getting something from the external. It never works like that. You become attached to it. Alex Hormozy said, just change the behavior. It's like, fuck man, why didn't I think of that with all the shit I went through? Why didn't I just stop drinking alcohol? Why didn't I just stop eating? That's what, man, mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. Because the behavior is driven by something deeper. You can try to force your way through it, but it often doesn't work. Some people can push through. It's a rare minority, but they won't change the part of their identity that has made them do it in the first place. And that's what you have to go into. So, why do we get caught there? Like, why are we truly unable to break free? Because most people keep trying to fight the conflict. The way that you grew up will develop the unconscious template for what you deem love, even if it's not love. And I'll get into the defense mechanism soon around this. So if everyone's got some paper there, you can take this out and you can try this. Right? If you look at your top 3 needs in a relationship, right, this will show this creative and reactive space. If you write down your top 1 to 3 needs, so if you list them on a page and then you write the opposite to that, so if it's safety, danger is going to be one of them, trust will be potentially betrayal or distrust, communication you'll say stonewall or lack of communication. The opposite is what you'll be attracting in. Because whenever we want something, it's coming from a place from the idea that I don't have it. So this is where desire and frustration forms. This is our conflict. So what it is I want something I don't have, which is usually material, and I have something I don't want, which is usually physical in the form of sickness. These are the 2 things we just get caught between all the time, but we just don't know it. So I desire something, I want something I don't have, and then I don't get it, so then I get frustrated, then I have something I don't want, which is the frustration, which only leads to more desire. This is the trap that we just get caught in again and again and again. So the only creation you're ever making is another reaction. That's it. The only creation you're ever making is another reaction. So, what was his name? Einstein. He said you can't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness that created it. You have to go beyond that. You must go beyond it. You have to go deeper. So when I see people transcend this, the prisons and the program, as it dissolves, people start to run through the individuation process. Now, for those that don't know the individuation process, it was named that by Carl Jung, and it's about the process to becoming whole and undivided internally. He uses a process in it, which is integrating the anima and the animus, which is the opposing masculine or feminine inside. So if it's male, it's the anima, which is the female part. Female, it's the animus, which is the male part inside, or the masculine part inside the female body, and creative imagination by accessing the archetypes. When I got deep into this work, I realized that there was a whole part that was missed, which is the psychological programming that we inherit. The ego is just a collector of programs. I believe it's all pretty much inherited in the womb. And in those first 3 years, it's just reinforced again and again and again and again. Now, when I started to see the creative imagination, which is accessing the archetypes, it's very sort of intangible and they have to come through at the right time. The big thing that wasn't really, and I'm not saying Carl Jung is wrong, he's right with all of that, but he missed the language and the programming part. That's the way I saw it. You see an image, you need a word to describe the image. Language is the absolute key. And I've seen this just by shifting thousands of people's perceptions now. You shift it, the meaning towards the event that's negative will shift, it will become positive, the body will release, especially when you hit a genuine insight, which is the truth. So people ask me, how do you know it's the truth? What will happen is when you hit the truth, you will have a physical reaction, it will dissolve and collapse the belief that is the lie that was in the way of the truth, hiding it before then. That's how you know. So it's not just, oh, that's my truth or that's your truth. No, the truth will have a legitimate biophysical response to it. And it's usually in the form of warm tingling, tears might come up. It's usually some like vibrational energy. You'll feel it all through your body. My partner had it when she was doing one of the programs in my course. Her head started to get a lot of pressure in, which is usually heat rising in the body, and then threw up, which is a purgatory process, purging. It's getting rid of it, it's clearing out. So the individuation process, like I said, is to becoming whole by dissolving the internal psychological structures that have been inherited and switched on through environment. The environment where there's absolutely no boundaries is in the womb. There's no psychic boundaries in the womb. So everything that happens to the child in the womb, the child's going to take that on when they come into this world. I've tried to look at this from many different ways and it keeps leading me back to that. Most things are inherited at that point. I'm not going to go too far down that part because I love talking about that. But what is a prison in our subconscious? It's a structure and it has a complete aspect to it which forms parts of your identity. Just making sure I'm good for time, because otherwise I'll go way over. So, like I mentioned earlier, thoughts, feelings, behavior, results, experiences, and patterns. Most people try to break the pattern at the pattern end, and that's why it doesn't work, because they replace it with another pattern. This is like when we're going through the grieving process. Grief can be such a powerful process, and I see this, and I'll be talking about masculinity and suicide tomorrow. But we see a lot of men that are depressed, but depression is the final stage of the grief process, that they don't know how to let go of that part of their identity, which most people, I shouldn't say most because I don't have accurate numbers for it. A lot of people I've worked with suicidal ideation, it's not that they want to die, it's the part of them is asking to die, but they've misconstrued the information as though they're meant to kill themselves. It's the programming that's asking to die. It's the program. A few of you are shocked when I say that, but it's quite profound. I remember I spent 2 years trying to figure out what program it was. That was the suicide program. I remember exactly where I was. It was at night time and I was driving home, and it was like a lightning bolt went off in my car and I went, fuck, it's every program's asking to die. A few people are responding to that. And it was so powerful because it was quite emotional too, because I thought, oh, the amount of people that wouldn't have had to leave if they'd known this information. And so the depression stage, when it hits, is the final stage of the grieving process. But then what happens with our current society, what do? We start identifying that we're depressed. And then that part of the identity replaces the one that's trying to die off. Right? So this is all in programming. So your whole life is your mind. Your whole life is your mind. Every single thing. I remember I did a money workshop and the first question I asked was, who wants more money? And everyone's like, me. And I said, no, you don't. None of you want more money, because if you did, you'd have it. Right? It's quite obvious when you think about it, right? If you wanted more money, you'd have it. But I actually, when I look at money, I use money as a way to identify what I need to leave behind. So if I want to make $1 million a month, why aren't I there? Because there's something stopping me from doing it. So it's a great revealer if you look at it from that perspective. So everyone sort of laughed because it's never actually about money. That's the thing, it's your relationship to money which dictates how much money you have, and most of that is usually based on your attachment style. Right? So if you're avoidant to money, it's like, well, I don't want it because I don't want to rely on you like I don't want to rely on anyone else. If it's anxious, I can't get enough, I need more and more, so it's never going to satisfy it. Replace that to a caregiver, then your relationship to money has just become your mum or your dad. right? This is all from programming and perception. So if you look at your life like a house, do you like the house you live in? It's a pretty good question to ask. Do you like the house that you live in? And let's say if we're using the house analogy, each one of these prisons is like a room within that house. But the thing is you don't know you're in the house and you don't know the rooms you're in. You're only looking through a small keyhole, and all you can see is what's through the keyhole, yet you've got a huge expanse of a mansion that you're in, and all you think that you've got access to is what you can see through the keyhole. That's a reactive life. A creative life is very, very different to that. So defenses, adaptations, perceptions, and reaction. So if you look at your reaction, it's a trigger. And what's a trigger? It's a defense mechanism. And what happens is the ego, in its magnificence, makes you have a feeling, and that feeling rises up and goes outwards, projection. Projection and feelings are the two things that the ego weaponizes, so to make sure that someone else takes responsibility for it and you don't discover the blind spot in the rooms, because once you see them, you can't unsee them, you can't put it back in the box. That piece of your identity has been liberated into awareness. You can start to put space in between it. Sometimes it just dissolves, depending on how old you are and how mature your brain is. So if you're over 40, like I am, it takes a little bit longer to do that. If you're in your 20s, your brain's not finished fully developing yet, so it'll usually go overnight. So I've got like 5 minutes, so I'll be able to get through this, I think. The prisons and psychological time. We're actually dictated more by psychological time than clock time. Clock time is a bit of an illusion. It's like the sun rises, the sun sets. That's a lie, we move. Right? So it's not necessarily clock time that we work to, it's psychological time. And psychological time is past, present, and future. Most people are just trying to deal with what happened in the past because they're not comfortable in the present and projecting it into the future so they don't have to relive the past. But what they do is they create an expectation. Expectations form in two arms, pessimistic and optimistic. The pessimistic person will say, I'm going to go on a holiday, goes on the holiday, it's better than what they anticipated, then they come back and remember that it was worse than what it was. That's the pessimistic. So we all know that. Most people are geared 80 to 90% in the negative. So what happens is when we have an expectation, we project that into the future, and this is where patterns actually keep happening. Unconsciously and subconsciously, we have an expectation based on our history that we're trying to avoid. The brain starts to process this, and then the body holds onto the energy, and by virtue of physics, you can't help but magnetize in the very thing that you're trying to avoid because the body wants to liberate the energy. Welcome to your own self-sabotage. You are the architect and designer of it all. You ever wonder in life, wherever you got problems, you always seem to be there? You're always there. So these prisons live in psychological time. There's ones that live in the past, there's ones that live in the present, and there's ones that predict and anticipate the future. So what are they? Some of these might hit some of you, like they may release something in the body. I would not recommend in saying all of them out loud. You can go home, I'm going to record this and I'll have it for replay. But one of the biggest ones that we experience is something's wrong. This is one of the biggest prisons. I've done something wrong, or there's something wrong with me. This is huge. Now, this is a basic prison. Now, what sits on top of that is a defense mechanism and negative emotional addiction to it, criticism. Criticism was a huge addiction for me because my mother criticized me a lot as a kid. So how did I get love? Go and find someone to criticize me or criticize someone else. And then what's the opposing force to that is to defend it. And if you've got to defend, what do you need? You need an enemy. And what do you want to do to an enemy? You want to defeat it. And then the ego makes you think that you have to go out to defeat the enemy so you don't discover the part of you that you need to defeat. So don't defeat the part of you that wants to defeat things. This is how the ego plays this. So there's something wrong as a defense mechanism and negative emotional attachment to criticism. This is huge in our social media society at the moment. Huge. Guilt is the main emotion of this. Something's wrong. You look at the justice system. The justice system means to make something fair, right? When we want to make something fair in that system, a judge sits at the top of a court case. What does a judge pass down at the end of a court case? A verdict. What is it? Guilty or not guilty? What must have that person done to be there? The assumption is something wrong, right? And the judge passes down the judgment at the end of the day. So this program, criticism is a judgment. This is where it comes from. This is based in the past. The next one, this is another big one, which is I'm not loved. I'm not loved. We see this in the attachment styles we were mentioning earlier. The attachment styles. Someone moves into protesting behavior. Protesting behavior says, prove to me you love me. You know the people that might break up with you over and over again because they're unhappy and they try to push you away. Then you go, sweet, I'm out. And then they go, no, don't leave. That's protesting behavior. So it looks like the person is saying, prove to me that you love me. So I'll push you away and then you'll say, no, don't break up with me, blah, blah. And then I go, all right, man, sweet. And then they go, no, don't leave. But they're not trying to get you to prove that you love them. They're trying to prove to themselves that they're not lovable. That's protesting behavior, and it has an addiction to rejection. Right? The people pleaser also comes in here as a behavioral adaptation. So that's I'm not loved. The next one is I'm not wanted. I'm not wanted has the addiction to abandonment. It's not that everyone abandons you or me, it's that you self-abandon to try to make sure someone doesn't abandon you, and then they abandon you, producing the very thing that you set this up for. That's what happens, because at some point there was something that went down. Maybe it was during pregnancy, the mother didn't want the child or heard the father yell saying, I don't want this effing kid or whatever. Something like that happens. And then the program switches on. And then the kid comes in to sort it out. They think they're sorting it out by making sure no one else abandons them, but doing that, they abandon themselves. And then there's a part of them that they don't want, which is in the program of I'm not wanted, and then they do anything to be wanted to make sure no one sees the fact that there's a part of them that's not wanted. Right, this is another one. Next one, which is a big one, which is I don't matter. This is someone that's not seen and not heard and feels like they're invisible. How can you influence the world of matter if you're in a program of I don't matter? It's like your hands are tied behind your back. So the only thing you keep manifesting is the fact that you don't matter to a person. So what will happen here is you will put someone else's needs at the top of your list. And you'll put your needs at the bottom of your list. And then what you'll do is you'll bring someone that puts their needs at the top of their list and your needs at the bottom of their list. And then this is why I got you to write down the 3 needs before. You go the opposite, you'll bring someone in that embodies those traits. So this is an addiction to deprivation. This develops a binge and purge cycle. The binge and purge cycle is where eating disorders will come from. Right? We're trying to fill up in order to feel fulfilled, but we can't fulfill on the fact we don't matter by being satisfied. Satisfied comes from the root word satis, which means enough, and also satiated, which means I'm full. But we want to be fulfilled, not filled up through something external. Next one is I'm not safe, which produces, this is a big one in the world of the attachment styles, because this is where in the world of attachment styles, avoidant and anxious, this is where this comes from. I'm not safe. I'm not safe to open up as an avoidant, and I'm not safe without enough reassurance as an anxious. This produces an addiction to distrust. If I'm not safe, I can't trust the world. And then I can't trust myself. It's interesting, I was working with someone that was in this, and she had a huge addiction to distrust. And I said, how do you approach life with this? And she goes, I ask life to prove that I can trust it. And I said, okay, let me guess, you keep getting situations to prove that you can't trust it. She goes, yeah, how'd you know? I said, because you telling life that it needs to prove to you that you can't trust it, the implication is that you don't fucking trust it. So you just keep getting the same situations again and again. The next one is I'm powerless. This is an addiction to control. Now, it's funny because you think the people that are addicted to controlling have the need to make sure everything goes their way, but it's actually not. The ones that are the most controlling have the biggest and deepest addiction to being controlled, because everything's controlling them. That's why they're trying to control it. This one will produce an adaptation to subservience and dominance. Subservience and dominance, this one will bring in. And the final one I'm going to, actually no, I've got a couple more after this. I'm not going to be okay. This is a future one. This is going to drive fear of loss. This is one where anxiety comes from. If I'm afraid to lose something, I'm going to try to hold on to it. You can't hold on to everything in life. The only thing you can lose is the idea that you can lose anything. And that's the part that needs to be lost. And that's not you anyway, so you can't really lose that either because it's fake. Let that sort of bend your mind into a pretzel. I'm worthless is the next one. I'll be talking about this one tomorrow. This is a big one for men. This is where the suicide comes from a lot of, is I'm worthless. And the addiction is to denial and being denied. My own value in this world is denied. It's a very powerful one. And the final one that I'll reveal today is I'm bad. And this is the deepest root of shame and humiliation. Shame produces humiliation. And the way through humiliation is humility. You own it. And then once you own it, generally you make humor out of it. So humiliation leads to humility, which leads to humor. The first three letters of all of those words is hum, which means to bring you back down to earth, to ground. So what do? You hang your head in shame. Where do you look at? The ground. That's the point of shame. It's a moral boundary to make sure that we don't step outside of that. It doesn't inherently mean you're bad. It just means that there's something that you need to overcome there. This is where in the world, especially in men's work, a lot of it's based in shame, and I've worked with thousands of men now and thousands of women too. Most people just blanket shame, and it's almost never shame that people are dealing with. It's one of the other things. This is why it's so important to know the structure, the negative emotional addiction, the behavioral adaptations, the thoughts, the feelings, the behaviors, the results, the experiences, and the patterns that go with it. Because otherwise you're just chasing your tail in a house of mirrors. You smash your reflection, you think it's overdone. There's all these other reflections that you haven't dealt with yet, and it will just keep manifesting until you hit the root of the problem. I finally got through a workshop on time. Awesome. Thank you very much. Yes, question. Do you follow me on Instagram? Pure Jaguar, Pure Jaguar. I'll release it on there, and I'll probably send it out in an email or something like that. I don't know, my guy's over there, so we'll figure it out. You're welcome. Any other questions before I jump out? Yes. Do I have a book? I know it is. That's why I'm recording it. So you can also subscribe to my email platform, but Instagram is the best. I'll put something up on my website to subscribe, but I'll send it out to everyone here for free. And you're like, a lot of people have asked me today if I have a book. I don't have one yet, but I think this might be a sign to write one. So, cool. Anyone else? It's a good one, man. I have thought about this, and I would want to do it in like a quote format with the meaning of the quote underneath it and how that relates to programming and shifting perception. So there's a book called The Daily Stoic. He took the Stoic philosophy and then sort of breaks down the meaning of it. I would rather do my own quotes and then explain what that means and how to use that to shift perception. I just don't think I got 366 of them that I'd be happy with. I'm a bit of a perfectionist with that, so yeah. Thanks, man. Yes? Dogs and children. For sure. Dogs and children. Probably, but to answer that seriously, one person... I don't know, honestly, probably my mother. She was the most cruel person to me, but she was my sensei at the same time. And so it was, when you put a kid into martial arts, they hate it. And then when they get into their teens, they've been training for 5 or 10 years, they're like, oh man, that instructor was a G. He was the best thing that ever happened to me. So I would have to credit that to my mum, because without her, I wouldn't have the dogged determination to do what I do, because it's taken a fucking hell of a lot of stubbornness and an incredible amount of defiance, which I had, which was most of my life was just trying to prove her wrong. And so I sit here today with the skill set and everything else, but she was definitely my sensei, so she's probably the most influential person that's been in my life. Good question. Yeah. I don't have a choice, man. Like, life has pushed this to me. I spent most of my life, my nickname when I had the investment company was the Wolf of Wall Street guy. I was wild, I was rebellious. I was going to join the bikies when I was much younger. I ended up in prison when I was 19. So I went through this whole life of like hedonism, destruction, violence, fighting. I wanted to be a professional fighter for a while. I trained martial arts for a long time. And then life just took all of that away from me, and then I discovered this as I was going along. So the first half of my life, I'm in my 40s now, so up until about 35, I was quite destructive. And then, so what I did was a lot of harm to people, and so now I made the commitment that the rest of my life is to helping people. And it doesn't matter how much money I've got or anything, I'll do this until that comes through. And I actually made a covenant with God before I started this. And I started out in sexual trauma with women when I started. It was the only area that I worked in. And I said, one of them was, and this was big because I was a really bad womanizer before that. And I said, I'll never ever cross the line with a client, and I never did. And anyone that asked me for help, I'll do my best to give them help if this is what I was supposed to do. And in 7 years, I've worked with, I think, nearly 7,000 people. So it's been a pretty big journey so far. And I feel like I'm only just starting to move. So I'll do this for as long as people need help. So I've got a pretty big market for that. So, yes. Look where you get triggered. See where you get triggered, and then listen to your thoughts around what's triggering you. Like, as an example, if you have one, I worked with someone just this week that was going through a lot of conflicts. And every single night he goes to sleep, he thinks about fighting someone. But he's just fighting a part of himself, and I'll finish up now, sorry. He's fighting a part of himself, so he's fighting his own peace. That's what he was going into. So you got to look for what thoughts are coming up, what images are coming up, where you're getting triggered, where that repeats, and start going inwards, saying why. Socratic thinking, why? That's the important part. It's a good question. I got to get off, but it's a good question. You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, the festival's been amazing. The other vendors here have been great. The people that attended have been awesome. Very inquisitive. The people here they're just a high level. They're very knowledgeable, very smart, very intelligent, inquisitive, curious, open to new information, as well as bring a ton of information as well. Brilliant people.